Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for everyone as well for the flexibility. I had a different kind of day than I expected today. Some things changed my schedule a little bit, but it's all good. And I'm so excited to be doing another interview. I know some of you have been asking where are the monologues. I've got a lot of them ready, prepared, just trying to find the time. But we'll be getting back to that as well as the call-in shows shortly. But today we're doing an interview, and I'm so excited about that. I love hearing people's stories. I just want to remind everybody before our guest joins us that if you are interested in sharing your story, please feel free to reach out to me. All the ways to connect with me are beneath this video. And we'll also have a deconversion poetry slam coming up in a few weeks. I'll be putting that on blast shortly. But if you're interested in sharing some poetry or a song about your journey or your healing, please let me know and we'll get you into the poetry slam lineup. But anyway, with that in mind, we're going to bring in our guest. Today we're speaking with Beth Rae. Beth, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Tim. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you. I really appreciate it. And you're from Boulder, Colorado, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I've got an aunt out there. I haven't been there in a long time, but it's a beautiful part of the country. Do you get to the mountains a lot there?
Yes. We
That's
spent
awesome.
a lot of time in the mountains. Yeah.
Very jealous, very jealous. Well, I'm going to kick us off here with a little bio, and then we'll get to know Beth together here. Beth is a somatic coach, an embodied healing guide, a business consultant, and the creator behind the website This Aligned Life. I've got a link for that beneath this video. And her work centers on helping people come home to their bodies after years of living under pressure, performance, shame, religious conditioning, relational harm, attachment wounds, and nervous system survival. So it sounds like you're going into the deep end on that stuff. We all need that. Through somatic coaching, therapeutic yoga, mindfulness, and value-based inner work, Beth helps people reconnect with the wisdom of their body, reclaim their agency, and live from alignment instead of fear. A central part of Beth's work is helping people heal from religious harm. Through her program called Untethered, Somatic Healing from Religious Harm, she explores how high-control religion can train people to disconnect from themselves, distrust their bodies, perform for belonging, and carry shame, and as if it was sacred. Beth's work invites people back into sensation, consent, boundaries, self-trust, and embodied freedom. She also brings her lived experience as a former CEO of a multidisciplinary therapy practice. She eventually stepped away from that to focus more on the values of intuition and embodiment. And today she supports entrepreneurs, leaders, and again, those recovering from religious, relational, and attachment harm. She's on Instagram at Embodied Beth. That link is also beneath this video. And she also has a Substack. So if you're interested in following her blog, check her out there. But with that in mind, Beth, could you please tell us some more fun things about yourself, and then we'll get started.
Yeah. Okay. Fun little tidbit. In my free time, I spend all of my free time rock climbing. And my whole family does too. I have a 2.5-year-old, and she's recently gotten really excited about being up on rope swings, which are much bigger than regular swings. So now we don't like regular swings at the park.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
2.5. You said 2.5?
Mm-hmm.
What's a great age. That's a great age.
Mm-hmm.
Mine are a little bit older than that, and it's nice when they can take care of themselves a little bit more, but it's you still miss those earlier times, especially the way that you talk kind of funny as they're learning the words. But anyway, we're so glad you're here. What's the best part of being in Colorado besides the mountains?
I mean, I think community for me. I've been here since 2013. I'm originally from Illinois, but there's just a lot. I'm surrounded by a lot of wonderful, open-hearted, like-minded people who prioritize compassion, love, connection, those kinds of things.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I really need to get out there again. My aunt out in Boulder. I remember years ago as a kid going down Pearl Street,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just as a Christian, that was a weird experience.
Yeah.
But just so beautiful. And of course, the athletes train up there because of the higher elevation. So such a cool place. Anyway, well, we're so glad you're here. I know that we've got a lot to eventually touch on regarding your current work, but we always like to ask people, if you could, to take us way, way back. Tell us what it was like as a kid growing up in your home. What did you hear about God and the Bible and Jesus and salvation? And I'll jump in with some questions here or there, but we'd love to just hear how your journey's been, and then we'll slowly move towards current day.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Way back. So I was born into a very religious evangelical home. It started mostly evangelical at a mega church was like my earliest memory of church, and going since birth. My parents my dad was actually an atheist in
Wow.
high school, and then became a Christian via dating my mom. So they got together in high school, we're high school sweethearts. And then, he kind of ended up like taking off, and sort of like that was his thing, like just studying the Bible, like doctrine, and, kind of eventually like rose through the ranks in church and was an elder and a guest speaker, and eventually started a home church and all this stuff. But we started in really evangelical, sort of more mainstream mega churches. And then as I got older, my dad studied more and more of the Bible, and we started going to more like legalistic, Bible-based, like Grace Bible sort of churches that there's a little bit of like IFB adjacency, I think, in the spaces, but they were, like pretty like siloed churches. Like the first one was its, own building and whatnot, but then everything sort of fell apart because of there's just so much, like in legalistic spaces in particular, like there's so much conflict. And so the board, the elders like had this disagreement. And I remember it was probably like
the color of the carpet.
Like, right. Exactly. Over something so ridiculous. And I was like maybe 8 or 9. And I remember like, okay, we were driving an hour to go to this church that I hated. And it was like, we'd be there for like 2 or 3 hours. And then all of a sudden, like everything was like really weird, and we just weren't going to go to that church anymore. And there was a new church being started, and we were going with the new church, and I didn't really know why. And like the thread really was like, I think a lot of like anxiety and fear. Like I grew into and was born into a space that was, the motivation was like fear. Like you are bad. You are bad at your core. Humanity is evil. We are all sinners. And therefore we need something external to us to purify us. And I believed that with all of my heart, that I was bad. And it's wild to me to think about as a mother now, teaching young children that they are evil just by virtue of existing in the world. But that was very much the message, and very much what I believed. And so, fast forward, we're in this new church, this new Grace Bible church. My dad's on the board at this church. He preaches on Sundays. He runs this book ministry. We all sort of contribute to the book ministry, which is just like a little pop-up bookshop selling authors like The Pearls and Douglas Wilson. And
God.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that was like just this really central theme,
So like ultra patriarchal as well, I assume.
Ultra patriarchal, right? Like no women were to teach in the church, and women, like your highest calling and like your highest goal was to get married and have babies for God. So that's a little bit, right? Like of a flavor of my childhood. I asked Jesus into my heart, for salvation. It was when I was like maybe 5, and I was feeling really alone. Like I remember having just this like sort of lonely childhood, because like the nature of being in like these like ultra fundamentalist spaces is that you're kind of isolated, right? And so I remember being really alone and wanting to feel good and to feel like my parents like really saw me and like saw me as someone who was worthy. And so I was like, Dad, I have to tell you something. And I remember he came into my bedroom, and I like told him I accepted Jesus into my heart, even though I had no idea what that even meant. I didn't feel any different. There wasn't like, I don't even know if I actually even prayed the prayer, you know what I mean? It was just like, this is what happened. And then it was like tears and celebration, and just such an interesting, like space to be like, this is what I must do in order to feel worth is like to take this invisible thing and put it inside of me. And then my worth is always forever tied to something out here.
With that, did you feel like as much as it might have been going through the motions, perhaps at that age, did you feel like as you got a few years into that it began to be a little bit more real over time?
You know, like I don't think it wasn't real. Even when I was like that, like, you know, like there was like this element of like, I guess not feeling like, did I do it right? Like, did I ask right? Like, did I don't even know, you know, like it just like this ambiguity. I think I believed so deeply in looking the way that everyone in my life was looking in order to be good enough. Do you know what I mean? Like where I wonder, I know from people that I've talked to, clients, like other ex-evangelicals, that it's a common experience to always feel sort of like a fraud in those spaces. And so I believed with all of my heart. And yet I also had this experience of like feeling like a fraud, like I wasn't doing it good enough and being saved enough always. Right.
Yep.
So which is so interesting to me now, like looking back on that, because it is this cognitive phenomenon of like splitting. So you like split yourself, right, in order to be like, okay, this is who I am as a Christian. And then here's this piece of who I am on the inside. And they don't match, because how can they ever for anyone if you're being really honest?
Yeah. I had the same thing, I would say, happen, but it was maybe from a doctoral perspective. Are you familiar with the pastor named John MacArthur?
Yes.
He was going through a series when I was homeschooled, and my mom had me like pick a couple pastors to listen to as part of my Bible instruction.
Yeah.
So I was listening to Chuck Swindoll and then John MacArthur. He happened to be going through a series at that time called The Gospel According to Jesus, which is about the topic of lordship salvation.
Yeah.
Meaning you can't take a quarter or a third of Christ. He isn't Savior, and then later on you make him Lord if you feel like it. Like he is Savior and Lord at all times. And if you take him at all, you take all of him, meaning he is not just your rescuer, he is your master. And if you're living like he's not your master, then you might not be saved in the first place, which was interesting in the context of like, we believed that once you were saved, you were always saved, but it was more the question of where you're really saved in the first place. They kind of got around it with these loopholes, but it puts you always on, red alert.
Yes, which, oh my gosh, like those names and like that argument just brings me so back, because those are like also people that like my dad would read and listen to, and like those are the arguments that he would make also. My dad being like the figure in the patriarchal figure in our house who was responsible for doctrine for the entire family, right?
I'm curious, did you feel like you were able to, it sounded like you knew what they expected. Was that easy for you? Like, were you the good girl, the good Christian girl, or was it like a secret rebellion inside and you just kind of like grimaced through it?
No. I mean, I did go through a rebellious phase, but that wasn't until much later. It wasn't until college. When I was living with my parents, I did everything I could to be the good girl, right? And I think that I really like was a good kid. My parents will say things like, "Oh, you were such an easy baby," as if like babies can be not good, or like, you know what I mean? It was just like such an interesting concept to consider. But yeah, they would say like, "Oh, you were such an easy baby. You were such a good girl." Yeah. And I always, like, I think like the worst thing that I got in trouble for was like, I wanted to be like, I wanted to be cool. And I remember It Takes Two was out and we went to Bible camp. And so me and one of my little friends, we went and stole the training bras of the older girls and we hung them in the trees to like play pranks. And I got in so much trouble. I had to give like not just like individual apologies to everyone, but like a group apology. Yeah. So that was my biggest transgression. Was
I was gonna say, if that's your biggest transgression, that's not too bad.
Yeah. Straight edge through high school. I never partied, never did any. Yeah.
It wasn't like you were out smoking behind the church building.
No.
What was it like when you were having times of worship, both public and private, what was it like just when it was just you and God? Did you feel like you were getting closer and closer to him over the years?
I did have these like pretty profound mystical experiences within the Christian faith. And I remember them being like during times of just like high emotion. So things like, like mission trips, like nature, like experiences in nature. I always connected nature with God. And I do remember having these times of like, just feeling so connected, even like while being alone with something greater. And I attributed that to, like the Christian God, like this is God, this is Jesus showing up in my life, showing me that he's real. Which now I still have these like, more mystical connected experiences in, similar situations and circumstances, not like missions, obviously, but like, like I very much am surrounded by nature and spend a lot of time in like yoga practices and somatics and connecting like deeply with my body and with others in those spaces. I do feel this like sense of like overwhelming connection and joy, but I like don't, I think it's just more of this like connection to spirit, but not necessarily like the Christian God, right? Like, but like a universal sort of, whatever ties us all together.
Yeah. It's interesting how so many of us realize in some ways, like we're so used to like focusing on, is Christianity true or not? And then it hits us like, no, it's mythology. It's not real. But then you slowly begin to realize like, okay, so what was I doing when I was praying all those years? I was actually talking to myself. And so if I could talk myself through it before, even though I was falsely attributing it to Yahweh or Jesus, I can still talk myself through it now. And in some ways you realize like the spirituality that you had connected so intensely to the Christian worldview, like you're not unspiritual now, you're spiritual in a different way. You're just not connecting it to that doctrine and that worldview. But it's so beautiful to kind of figure out, and everyone's got to figure out their own spirituality. And it's been awesome as an atheist to realize that we're all going to land differently. And it's like, it's learning who you are and figuring out, well, what am I like? Am I more spiritual? Am I more, more matter of fact and, sort of like the Richard Dawkins kind of atheist, like whatever it is, but just to find some way to feel connected to yourself and grounded in the universe. And it's kind of cool to think that even though it's like, it was all a waste in one sense, it's like, it wasn't a waste. You thought you were getting to know God. You were kind of getting to know yourself. And so like start over,
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I wouldn't say also too that I'm now like anti-spirit, right? Or anti like spirituality or anti-faith. Like I think that like, people should believe in whatever makes them the best version of themselves, whatever leads towards kindness, compassion, a sense of like, us all being interconnected, like together as people, but also with like land and the earth, like those things, like there are, right? Like, and things that like I took away, from my Christian upbringing, like I think that there are like universal truths and things that like are just good in the world, and not necessarily that there's this binary, right, of like good and evil, but there are things that bring us all towards less suffering, right? And so whatever it is that creates a path of deeper compassion and kindness, like, do that. And nobody know, right? Like you can't know. And I think that's my biggest gripe with fundamentalism in particular, is that it creates this false binary. And there's so much anger and hatred and separateness that comes from it, and demonizing people and like marginalizing groups. And that to me, whoever it is that you like, if you believe in Jesus, that is not Jesus. That is not what he, you know what I mean? Like even from having been in that space. So I can appreciate the teachings of Jesus, and I can appreciate the teachings of Buddha, and I can appreciate the Tao, like, whatever. Like I can appreciate these like threads of truth in many different spiritual practices without becoming obsessed with finding like, this is the truth and I must therefore force everyone else to believe exactly what I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. And I want to definitely ask you some more about yoga and your somatic work later.
Yeah.
But I love how you're saying this. And it's so cool to realize too that the things that we were afraid of as Christians, like yoga and meditation and all the stuff that we said, oh, that's just Eastern mysticism, or that's demonic. It's like a lot of this stuff you really are you're getting back to knowing yourself more and more and being connected to the universe. And I think a lot of us, as we study early versions of Christianity, we realize a lot of these earlier versions, they were much more Gnostic, they were much more esoteric, and a lot of them probably were very connected to the earth and certainly to the stars. There's all kinds of star stories woven into the Bible, and you think some of these people were originally not writing literal history, they were writing metaphorical history and writing lessons. And so, but a lot of these lessons were connected to stories that came from the stars. So they were very connected to the world around them. It's interesting to sort of reframe it all. But going back to your story, what was it like as a teenager, especially when you hit puberty and all that? Like, did your walk with Christ get more bumpy, or did it get smoother? How'd that work?
Yeah. So, high school, middle school, high school was like an interesting space for me. I was homeschooled through middle school, and then I went to public school for high school, and I kind of bounced around between like Christian private school, a couple of different public school, like neighborhood schools in elementary school, and then settled into this public high school. And at that time, my family was increasingly sort of like, as I got older, my family became increasingly fundamentalist. And so during that time, my dad became really interested in Michael Pearl and Debbie Pearl, and they're the To Train Up a Child people, I'm sure, and also biblical courtship. And so I was not to date. I was not to wear makeup outside of I could put on mascara in high school. And then, like dress modestly, conservatively. And there was never like this like outright push that like I had to evangelize or like become, some kind of like a Christian apologist, but I did. I like certainly was. Like I remember my freshman year of high school, and I went to school in a year early. So I was 12 when I went to high school, which is pretty young to be in high school. And I remember arguing with my freshman year honors biology teacher about creationism. And, just like, right, starting new school, like, hello, here I am, this like weird Christian girl who's like, gonna fight all of her teachers and like writing papers in English on abortion and, partial birth and like afterbirth abortion, like, which now I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much, right? I was a little soldier for Jesus. Yeah. And I was really interested. I'd always had crushes, and like I'd always had like, like my little diaries and Nick Carter and like a heart frame picture frame underneath my pillow that I kept. My sisters would like steal my diary and, whatever, oust me. But in high school, I was like totally boy crazy, but like also like so suppressed in terms of like what was allowed because of this like Christian courtship, and like, what was it? The kiss dating goodbye. What's his name?
Joshua Harris.
Thanks. And then now he's not like, he's like, oh no, we can not kiss dating goodbye. But anyway, so that was like, right. That was the time that I was in school. And so, and like purity culture and all that, just like sort of interweaving. And so, yeah, it was an interesting time. It was a weird time. I remember, the first person who asked me out in high school was a guy on my cross country team. And he asked me to go to prom with him, and he was a junior and I was a freshman. And I just like didn't know how to respond. I had like very stilted social skills at that point from like being homeschooled and being like so like sheltered and whatnot. And so I was like, Mom and Dad, like, what do I do? And they were like, absolutely not. You tell him no. And I was like, I'm sorry, but no. Like, you know, and I'm like, this poor guy, like, was like, you know, just like tried so, you know, like was like, like putting himself out there. It was like vulnerable, like whatever. And then there's another situation where it like kind of gets worse. It's like, as I get older and they're like, oh no, like people are asking her out. Now what do we do? My dad's like, okay, well, we're going to like do biblical courtship. And like this guy asked me, it was nice, sweet guy, Amir, asked me out in high school, maybe my sophomore year. And I didn't like him. And again, I like didn't know what to do. So I went to my parents and was like, okay, what do I don't know. I don't like him. I don't want to go out with him, but what do I do? And they were like, invite him over for dinner. And then he can ask Dad. And then Dad will tell him no for you. So he comes and like brought me like a golden bracelet.
Oh.
Oh my God, I know. And like my mom flowers, like he brought gifts for everyone. And then he like goes in the basement to talk to my dad to ask me out. And then like leaves crying, right? Like I wasn't even there for the conversation. Like just the two men, the boys talked about whether he could date me. And my dad, you know, whatever, handled it for me. So that was like the context of my dating in high school.
That's really
weird.
And that's really a big deal that you go to the daddy first. I remember I did not grow up in a context where that was really done. But I remember at one point when I entered the ultra Calvinist group, more reform group, they were heavily into that. Mm-hmm. And you did not, you know, you didn't even talk to a girl. Like, it wasn't like you talked to her and then go to her daddy. Like you talked to her daddy before the first word with the girl. Yeah. The daddy is the total gatekeeper. And it's sort of related to the whole stay-at-home daughters mentality. You know, you're under your daddy and you stay under your daddy until he passes you on to another man, you know, like the chattel slave that you are. But it was a real eye-opener for me to realize, like, some of these girls, like, that's what they grew up with. And like, it doesn't matter how good of a connection you might have or how the chemistry is. If you don't do this just right, you will be seen as a bad guy because you did not go to her daddy first. So I remember losing entire chances to talk to girls just because I talked to her first. And I just didn't even know that that's the rule. But man, the people that have enforced that, they really enforce it.
Yeah. And what a concept, like, to teach young boys also, but like young girls in particular, that like you are under this male hegemony. And, you know, it was like the umbrellas, umbrellas of authority. You remember that? Bill Gothard, which I asked my dad about as an adult. And he said he didn't know who Bill Gothard was. And I was like, but you used his umbrellas all the time. Like, God, Christ, men, girls, like at the very, like, children, right? Like, whatever, wife, housekeeper. Yeah. Wild.
Did you get the sense that some of the strictness of it all was, in a sense, the idea of, even though it's kind of demeaning, that it's also a way of elevating women, of saying, I'm not going to let any old horny guy that just thinks you're cute to come over and date you. Like, he better be up to snuff. He better be absolutely excellent. His life better belong to Jesus. I mean, I remember I had one guy interview me for like an hour about church. I never talked to his daughter yet. He interviewed me about church history, and I answered everything in depth, but I didn't answer it enough. I didn't know quite enough. He wrote me off just purely because I didn't know my church history well enough, apparently, at that time. Like, but it's the idea of, like, if you're not just like that, you're not just out there because she's, you know, for pure carnal reasons, but like, if you're not aiming to be a church leader as a man, you're not going near my daughter. I'm like, my daughter's going to be the wife of a church leader. Was that the mentality you had?
Yeah, I mean, there was certainly that. I think that there was like a protective, like, I think that was like first and foremost. So I think that my parents loved me and my sisters and my brother, like the best that they could, the best that they knew how to. I wish that perhaps they would have sought information outside of like what just affirmed, like what they wanted to believe. I wish that they would have, like maybe considered things just outside of this box that they put themselves in. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's human beings control when things are terrifying, when bad things have happened to them and they're trying to prevent them from happening to other people. So I think like a lot of my upbringing in particular, and probably like for a lot of people, like there's a lot of control in fundamentalist spaces, and a lot of it is probably done with not ill intentions, but the impact is really, really harmful. Yeah. So I guess I just don't see also like intent negating impact.
Yeah, for sure. Now, this giving a little precursor to what we'll talk about later with your current work. Did you feel in any way like you were disconnecting from your body in your teenage years?
Completely. Yeah. I think I was, and perhaps like a lot of us too, just like born in I'm going to date myself, but born in the 80s, were born into a space of disconnection from body, like the cry it out, right? Like I know that my parents did cry it out with me, like as a baby. So like as soon as you come into the world, like you learn, or at least I learned, right, that like my expression of something is wrong was not meaningful. So then you learn to like suppress it. And that's pre-verbal. Like that's before I even had language to understand or to express. And so that's not necessarily like a direct result of evangelism, but like, like like Dobson was like huge in terms of like parent, like discipline, and like spare the rod, spoil the child. And like we were spanked and like told and taught to disconnect from, like not directly, but like that, like yourself is not good, right? Like that, like you don't want to be connected to yourself because you want to be connected to God, and God is like the only source of things that are good, and you are evil. And so you cannot listen to yourself. You cannot listen to your intuition. You cannot listen to your desire, right? Pleasure, like things that bring you joy. Everything must be outsourced. And so anytime that you're, looking for worth outside of yourself, it's like completely going, right?
Yeah. It's such a weird thing too in the teenage years, going back to that, where you're sort of, especially in the Christian world, where you're aiming to get married young to avoid temptation, where you're kind of like starting to think about things like marriage and having babies, which includes sex. So like you're kind of like half thinking about sex, but yet, and I mean, I don't know exactly what they would have taught all the girls, but for the guys, it was like, don't think about it. And so there was a lot of inherent shame of just like even acknowledging like I'm heading potentially towards marriage fairly soon in the next couple of years. It was almost like you had this dichotomy of like want marriage for the sake of the ministry that's going to happen, obviously having children, but having them as little soldiers for Jesus, and I remember even when I went to a school called Bob Jones University, and one of my that school, and one of my roommates, he literally said like, I don't look for a dating partner or a courtship partner based on her beauty. He's like, I do not factor her beauty in one bit. My question is, will she make a good pastor's wife? That's all I care about. And it was like you couldn't ever just like want anything without being ashamed of yourself,
Yeah, I mean, it's dehumanizing, isn't it? Like both for women, but also for men, because like you're expected to just completely shut down anything that comes from you in a dating context, in every context, right? Like anything that comes from within is bad, and everything must be from out here. I remember purity culture. I remember going to a conference. It was like, I don't even remember the name of it, but it was like, like one of those like youth conferences, like it was like youth group conference. And I went to like an abstinence talk, and this woman the facilitator passed around a cup, and everyone spat into the cup. And then she started putting it in people's faces and be like, you want to drink this? You want to drink this? You want to drink this? And that was like one of like the biggest memories that sticks out in my brain from like, okay, what is sex? Is like this cup of spit. And I didn't go to sex ed in school because that was like, secular, and it was like not. So I didn't know anything at all about it or how it worked. Like my mom told me that it was like men have a hose and you are the garden. And that was like my whole context. That was what I knew sex was like until I was like 19 years old and the spit in a cup. So it's like, yeah, you have like that. And then also there's this like pressure to like get married young and like you're just gonna like be with your husband and like figure it out and it'll all just come naturally. But it totally freaking doesn't. It wasn't until, oh my gosh, I think it was like my late 20s that I read this book. It's Sex, God, and the Conservative Church. And I'm trying to remember the author's name, and I can't remember her right now, but she is fantastic. And she talks about how abstinence and purity culture, like people who grew up during that time, show similar symptomatology to childhood sex abuse survivors. Yeah, right. Which is like, yeah, the impact of it is just like, it's so disorganizing. I mean, and that's like the thing with trauma, right? Is it's like, it's not just an event. It's not just like what happens. It's the confusion that you live with. And I see purity culture as this like mass movement of causing sexual trauma for like everyone who lived through it. And then like having to like put that together with, okay, now I'm supposed to like be in a marriage and be like, just great. Like whatever the man wants, Yeah. It's weird.
It's interesting. I was reading, but right before I escaped Christianity, I was working on a book about the body from a Christian perspective, and I was reading a ton of books. But there was this one book, I believe it's called What Our Mothers Never Told Us, but it's written, I believe, from a Jewish woman's perspective, but talking about purity culture as well. But just the idea that in many ways, when you have sort of pledged your virginity and your purity, your modesty to God and maybe to your pastor, to your parents, certainly to your dad, that it's really like, it's almost impossible to flip that switch. And then you get people that sort of, they get married young and then they realize, in their 20s, they hate sex and they want to die, even though they're like married as a Christian to a Christian. Yeah. Not all of them, obviously. There's some, I'm sure people that had great marriages, but a lot of people really struggle with it because you can't just say no 1,000 times and then suddenly say yes. And I always never forget, I'll tell this real quick and we'll get back to your story. I was I switched colleges. I went to Bob Jones for a year and then went to a smaller college in Pennsylvania. But this one night, the dean of men got all the men together in the dining room. And I'm expecting like, guys, you're all, so many of you are trying to be pastors, missionaries, like, guys, I just want to fire you up to share the gospel. And that's what I'm expecting. I'm thinking this is like, because at Bob Jones, the men were called the preacher boys. I was a preacher boy there. And so like, it was like a badge of honor to be a preacher boy. And so it was just this male patriarchal, leader of the church kind of garbage. And I'm thinking like, he's getting all the men together to rile us up for sharing the gospel. And he gets us together with one simple message: guys, the masturbation has to stop. And I'm thinking, I knew he was married to like this. He's married to this drop dead gorgeous model, by the way. So he had it made in the shade in that category, I guess. But he's telling all these guys, these single guys, to stop masturbating. And it really hit me that like, when you tell people no 1,000 times, and then you finally say yes, that shame does not go away. Like you might do it because you're horny as hell and you just have to do it. But like the shame on the inside, you're almost doing it like your little devil getting away with something, like instead of just fully enjoying your humanness,
Yeah. Well, cause it's like when something is so associated with like sin, like it doesn't become not. Like you can't, like there's no way to like untangle that. Like just because now you have like the label of marriage to like cover you or whatever, right? Like, and it doesn't even like, also beyond that, like who as a human being has not had some sort of sexual thought before a marriage? Like it literally doesn't exist. So then every single person who goes through these fundamental ideologies around purity culture is believing that they are so deeply wrong and evil for being a fucking human, right? Like you're just a human having human thoughts, and that is demonized, and then you are bad. And the crazy thing is that making something so taboo. I mean, like that's when, you have things like addiction and like that's when bad things happen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really
Rather than creating like a healthy relationship with your body and like who you are.
Yeah. You really end up with a split personality where you're
Yes.
forced to have a public facade, especially if you're in any kind of ministry or you're up on stage a lot, where you're like, no, I'm good. God and I are close. And I fight sin successfully. You keep that mask on and no one really knows the real deal. And I had endless conversations with the men, like in the men's dorms. You can imagine what the men's Bible studies always, it always goes to one question: how are you doing with your thought life? And we know what that means. Like that's what every Bible study is about. And it's amazing though. You mentioned before, like the whole idea of the starting point for you was that you were taught you were bad, from the earliest days. The shame really just kind of keeps on expanding. Were there other venues besides, embodiment and sexuality that you were noticing that you were just feeling like you just don't like yourself?
Yeah, 100%. I think it all sort of goes back to the body also, like, so, like regardless of like what, what the particular sin is, it's like, it still is like cutting off. I was depressed when I was maybe 11 years old, 12 years old was the first time that I was diagnosed with depression. And it runs in my family, but I also think that because I actually like, I'm not depressed anymore. I actually think it's like, it was shame. It was like this like internalized anger and shame toward like me being bad. And I think that's what happens when people are turned into vessels and vehicles for control. We're turned into something to use rather than whole people, like who are autonomous and independent. And so I see that as being like, you become, right? Like as soon as you're born, if you're born into Christianity, right? It's different for people who like have come into it. But as soon as you're born, like you are taught you are bad, you are wrong, you are evil. Who you are is evil. And so therefore we must use you and have everything come from an external source. And so, yeah, like my thoughts around, like obviously like the purity culture, sex and sexuality, was like a huge one, but also just like socially, like I thought that I was like worse than everyone else. Do you know what I mean? Like it caused like social anxiety because I thought that like nobody else is like as weird, awkward, uncomfortable, like in their skin as me. Like nobody is as bad as me. Like I am like whatever, chief sinner. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there's almost an element of like how self-deprecating can you be as a badge of honor in fundamentalist spaces too, right? And so like the more you hate yourself, the more close to God you are in a way. And that is like, to hate yourself, you literally have to disconnect. You cannot live in your body and hate it.
A lot of us in those contexts are really driven to like a perfectionism and an OCD spiritual. Did you get into that at all?
Perfectionism completely. I'd be like calculating my GPA, but like, at the beginning of the semester, like how am I going to make sure that I have a 4.0? Like, yeah, for sure.
The one thing that affected me a lot, and this was just something I honestly still to this day struggle with, and I'll admit it. We can leave Christianity, but its roots are deep in us. But I became really convicted from a young age that the most important thing was to share the gospel with the lost. And I heard that through, stories of missionaries, the missions conferences, certainly preachers. We had the Christian radio on in the background like all the time. It was like other people have like classical music. We had Christian preachers literally preaching. And they were the old time. If you remember, I don't know if anyone knows his name, like Oliver B. Green, the old time gospel hours. You're hearing like an old organ, from somewhere in Appalachia. These guys, they pound the pulpit and they're preaching endlessly about you. Your life is about bringing people to Jesus. And that got in me so intensely that, and a mixture as well of like, don't get caught up in the things of this world. Keep your eyes focused on the things of the Lord and on heaven and eternity. And I mean, that was like my top priority in life. And what happened was I became perfectionistic in the little things, like have your devotions and make sure you're praying and pray through the list, pray for the pastor and the missionaries and your neighbor down the street. But it became as well, like, don't do anything that's really selfish for you. Like, for example, I got hyper judgmental of my family and my extended family that on a Sunday would watch 2 or 3 episodes of a football game. I was like, each one is like 2.5, 3 hours. Like, so we're going to spend literally like what, 6, 7, 8 hours watching football on a Sunday. And they were like, well, it's a day of rest. It's restful. I was like, yeah, but you're doing something so carnal, so worldly. And I was just so judgmental, even as a young kid about this. I hated American football as a kid. I hated it not because I hated the game, but because I hated that it was like, this was our entire weekend. What are we doing for God? And that passage in Isaiah 6 where he says, where the Lord says, who will go for us? And he says, here, my Lord, send me. And then they, purify Isaiah's tongue with the coal or whatever. And then he goes and does his ministry. Like, that was me. I was like, I want to go. And so everything was like, you must be about the things of the Lord constantly. And so like, for example, if they were watching football, I'd be memorizing verses, literally thousands of them. And it became this hyper intense OCD to do this to be like, the minute that the door is open for sharing the gospel, I can do it, backwards and forwards. I know every verse off the tip of my tongue. I'm not looking for this little tract to walk you through. I am the living tract. I can do it. And it got to the point where it became really hard to ever rest. And it was like, that really sucks. To this day, I don't watch any shows for more than 5 minutes. If I watch, say there's like a 2-hour movie, if I watch it for 5 minutes, I'm done. I'll watch 5 more minutes the next night. It takes me 2 or 3 weeks to watch a movie because it's like, I've got to do something to be productive. It's just frustrating. I'm still trying to get over this religious trauma. And for a lot of us, especially if you're good at it, if you can get your ducks in a row and get all the trophies, then you're like, oh my God, I'm not like trying to be perfectionistic, but then I kind of fail. I'm like, I flourish, this is great. I get all the applause and it just keeps going,
Yeah. So it's right. Rest is such a big one. I think a lot of us have difficulty with like stillness and being like, okay, without something filling it. Which then makes it really hard. It makes it really, really challenging to be like actually present, right? Because we're always thinking about the future or like the sins of the past. Yeah.
You realize as you look back at all this stuff that you basically were like never safe in your body or your brain ever.
Yeah, ever.
And it's crazy. And I guess that's where a lot of what your work, which we'll get to shortly, but a lot of what your work is helping people to do. What was it as you're growing up in all this and it's just so intense, you're in purity culture and patriarchy. What was it like maybe the next step of your early adulthood where as you're moving towards marriageable age, like what happened in your story?
Yeah. Well, I went away to college. And of course, like I had to go to a Christian college. I ended up picking, because there was just like this part of me that was like, I don't want to be like that weird kid anymore. like I just want to be normal. I just want to be normal. Like, I just want to have a normal college experience. Like I want to have like friends that aren't weirdos. Like I want to date somebody who's not like my dad's best friend's son. Just to not stand out. Like I wanted to just fit in. So I picked the least Christian school I could go to. Picked a Lutheran college.
Okay.
Which my parents agreed to, like only if I would go to church every Sunday. There were like all these like stipulations and like whatnot in place. I I did sort of the classic, like, pastor's daughter kind of thing, where I like went and like had my first taste of alcohol and like didn't know how to stop or like what was enough. So I kind of like, that was like sort of like my rebellion of like, I've been so repressed for so long and I still get in trouble like all the freaking time, right? Like nothing was ever good enough. So that was where like, I think maybe, yeah. And maybe like, you know, just like our like upbringing was like a little bit different in that way of like, I tried my damnness and I still was like always like never enough. So then I was like, screw it. I'm going to just do whatever I want to do. Which wasn't the best. It was not the best. It was not the best situation. I wouldn't recommend it.
But you still felt like you had a relationship with God through it all?
I did. I mean, it was more like at an arm's length. Like, yeah. It was more like, okay, that part exists, but like, we're just going to kind of like set it aside for now, you know? So like, you know, like that piece of like splitting, like where it's like, okay, like I'm just going to like I can't feel like whole and integrated because I don't know how to reconcile like this part of myself with this part of myself, like this like desire for community, right? And desire for like belonging that like wasn't in like a weirdo fundamentalist space. And then like this also like desire for like spirituality. I didn't know how to bring those two pieces together. So I just like kept them completely separate. Yeah. Yeah. And I got myself into some dangerous situations, like some really, really dangerous situations. And didn't have like the wherewithal to like know, you know, like that I was surrounding myself with like not good people. I think that there's a certain sense of like obvious vulnerability when you're like that like classic like pastor's daughter, elder's daughter, you know, whatever, like who's like totally sheltered and then like is like out in the world. Like people kind of like can sense that.
Yeah. It's interesting that when you really look at those situations, a little bit of exposure would have actually made us a lot stronger. Like the alcohol, if you just had a little sip at dinner time or something, even just once a month, like it would just, it's like everything is these little secrets, or at least they feel like they're secrets, and they're not, you know, it's just, I remember when I had this experience a lot with the body in terms of my perception, even as a Christian. When I was at Bob Jones, they had this art gallery, I mean, huge for Western religious art. It is second in value in the whole world, only to the Vatican. And
wow, I didn't know that.
Filled with Baroque art. I was a guard there. I was guarding Rembrandts, and it was just amazing. I mean, I loved it. There were times, you know, it'd be like 2 or 3 hours and nobody would come through. Cool. And I just stand there and stare at the art. It was great, making $350 an hour. But it's you know, South Carolina back in the day. But I remember at one point, this one gallery that I was guarding, it had a Baroque painting of a woman that was topless. Like, you know, some of the real old ones, like that French one where the Liberty is guiding the people, where she's holding up a French flag and she's topless, but she's holding the, you know, guiding people into war. It was something like that. You know, it wasn't erotic in any sense, but I remember asking the person that was like the curator of the museum, you know, how does Bob Jones defend that? Because we're so conservative, and yet here's a topless photo. Is that not pornography? Is that not at least an issue? And they're like, no, there's a difference between fine art nudity and pornography. And this is definitely fine art nudity, which began a whole range of topics that I studied and thought about for a long time, for years, really. But it made me think for a second, like everything, including nude art from the Baroque era, was just such a secret for so long. And then once someone just says something like, no, that's fine. That's okay. You can look at that. Yeah. It was like, oh, wait, like really? Like, that's okay. It was like this secret just kind of like went, it's not a secret anymore. And it's just so many things like that. I could tell you tons of little anecdotes, but like they added up to, I feel like we're telling all these secrets and they're not actually that big a deal. And the minute that you realize you can live like that, like it's not a big deal, it's okay. And I don't know, I felt like so many of the things that became real issues weren't actually real issues, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
So did you get married young, as many people in purity culture do, to make sure you stayed as pure as you could?
No, I didn't. No. I kind of, went through this rebellious stage, and part of that was getting a master's degree. which, you know, which just like wasn't something that many people did in my family, like at higher degrees. And so, yeah, like education became that for me. And like through education, I remember my freshman year of college actually taking an Eastern religions class, and the teacher had us do a meditation, just like a mindfulness, you know, kind of like following the breath, the Vipassana style meditation. And I remembered it feeling so like nourishing and like calming to my nervous system, and then immediately leaving and dropping the class. Like, I can't do that. It's like spirituality. That's not Christianity. I can't be involved in that. But there was like this, like, you know, crack. There was like this crack in the system, right? Of
like it was demonic. Like it was demonic to do that.
Yeah, right. Like this must be something like really bad. Like not, you know, yeah. So and right, like yoga too, like in my childhood was like totally demonized. Like that was like they're chanting to demons and like, you know, whatever, like doing like satanic rituals and whatever. Yeah, which is just it's so funny. But yeah, so like just like little cracks throughout my like higher education and a poli-sci class. I remember like being like, oh, you know, like of course, like everyone should have access to like food and like basic health care, and like, you know, like we're all humans, we all deserve that. And then this like Republican like in the class being like, I thought you were like the other Republican in the class. Like, what are you saying? Like you want socialized healthcare? That's so bad. And I was like, well, I just want everyone to have equal access and opportunity. Right. And so like, just like these like little cracks like that happened throughout like higher education that then led to, you know, eventually, you know, me having like deviated enough to be like going to like totally like different, more like liberal churches, like that were just like progressive and like, you know, like doing things like caring for, you know, like the homeless in our city and like actually being with like marginalized people, and like, you know, like doing things that were like really like in the direction of like kindness and compassion and equality and whatnot. So it was just like sort of like this like gradual like movement away, until I went through a divorce, which was like so I got married at 28 for the first time.
To a Christian?
Somebody who was great at presenting himself as, you know, whatever it was he was supposed to be. So I don't know that he was ever like actually Christian. I don't know that I don't know that anybody's ever, but
yeah, for sure.
Himself in that. Right. Yeah. And he was diagnosed by my therapist, who did not tell him, but my therapist, two separate therapists that I saw, that he had then come into like therapy sessions for, told me that he was a clinical narcissist, which was like kind of before like narcissism was like in vogue, you know, like to be like used, you know, like it's like kind of like people are like, oh yeah, like whatever, like he's self-centered, he's a narcissist, she's self-centered, she's a narcissist, whatever, right? So just like a lot of like illusions of grandeur. And, you know, like there was never anything like that he did that was ever wrong in any sense or capacity. Right. And so like, I, you know, like, which, you know, like when you grow up in these fundamentalist spaces, like that, like real rigid, like somebody who like knows and is right. Like that is like somebody that you want to follow. Right. Like I think most probably like cult leaders and like charismatic leaders, like have some narcissism. Yeah. And so like, to me, it was like, that was like the type of person that you sought, like when I sort of like came, you know, back into like my, like, okay, like I'm in this more liberal leaning, like Christian space, like more progressive space. And so, yeah, I met him like in that time, got married really fast. And yeah.
Well, can I ask about the aftermath of that? Two big questions come up to my mind right away. Number one, did you feel like you were now like had a scarlet letter that, you know, in so many of our fundamentalist groups, if you're divorced, you have really, really violated God's best for you. But also like did you have a lot of anger? Like, God, where the fuck were you? Why didn't you protect me from this bad guy? Like, I could have stayed single and been waiting for a really good guy. And here you just let this guy waltz in. And like, I've been through a ringer myself. And it's like, you just, if I were a Christian when it happened, I would have been like, where were you? I thought you cared. I thought you were going to make, take the years that the locusts have eaten and restore them. And it says, if you, God says that he'll give you the desires of your heart. And I'm like, come on, like, I've given my everything to you. Where were you? Why didn't you protect me from this bad stuff? What was that like for you?
Yeah. Great question. So, I actually went through sort of like my process of deconstruction and leaving that marriage at the same time. So, we spent some time living abroad. We were in Australia, and I wasn't working during that time. And like it was like this like long-term work project, and it was supposed to be like a really exciting time, and it ended up being like one of the most like lonely experiences, because just being with somebody who was narcissistic, like in a foreign place, who like really, there was a lot of like covert control, and no one that I could be friends with was like good enough to be friends with him or like in his circle. And so I, like anytime I try to make a friend, like he would sabotage it. And so I ended up finding, doing just a ton of yoga. Like he would work and I would just like go to like 3 or 4 yoga classes a day there, and like just like felt really just like connected in that way, like connected to myself, and to like something like, greater than me too. And I came back. When we came back, we were only there for, it was like 8 or 9 months. So, better part of a year. Came back and I went to yoga teacher training. And during yoga teacher training, it was like this beautiful program that was really centered on social justice and like accessibility and like understanding like Hindu mythology and like the roots of yoga, all of these great things. And I found a lot of truth in yoga and in these teachings that were not Christianity. And like it evoked a lot of similar, like sort of like mystical experiences like I had in Christianity, like these just like deep feelings of like connectedness and like not aloneness and like, like something greater. And so that sort of like coincided with my marriage also falling apart. And so I left both Christianity and my marriage at the same time.
Can I ask a little bit about that process? Yeah. Did it scare you to think that if you were walking away from God, and any real sense through that maybe this was the devil's tricking you, and that you might actually be one of those people that had falsely professed faith, and now that you were, in a sense, leaving was evidence that you weren't really a Christian in the first place, therefore you're actually still in danger of condemnation and hell? Did that kind of stuff go through your head and scare you at all, or were you able to push that aside?
I sort of like always thought that, like throughout my entire like tenure, just like being a Christian, like I was like always wondering if, did I believe enough? Was it enough? So like actually when I like let go, no, it stopped. Like it was like, like, and every once in a while something will pop up, right? Like even still, every once in a while I'll be like, oh my God, what if I got it all wrong? And then I'm like, yeah, but like, what if everybody's got it all wrong? Right? Like, nobody knows. And like, just like, there's a freedom in like being able to admit that and to be like a human being, like a whole human being, and to like live comfortably in uncertainty. And there's a lot that I find in, like a lot of, right, like different lineages of teaching, but in Buddhist teaching in particular, like the concept of impermanence and like everything being impermanent feels so liberating, because, if everything is like all, changing, there's nothing really to hold on to, then grasping is just an illusion. And so that's where, like I kind of like come to this place of like centeredness in the midst of things always being, inconsistent, not the same, changing, right?
Yeah. What was it like when you finally could say the words, I don't believe the same way. Like you said earlier, like maybe there's some good teachings of Jesus, turn the other cheek, or give to the poor, but stuff you could easily get from Greek philosophy anyway. But like, when you finally said, like, I'm not a Christian in the truest sense, I'm not a believer in the blood atonement kind of stuff, did that, like, what was that day or hour, week like when you finally said those words in your head?
Yeah. My ex-husband was the first person that I told. And it was when we were, like going through this really hard time, like we'd go for days without talking to each other, living in the same space. It was like so uncomfortable. And I was like, I don't know if I believe in God anymore. And he was like, oh, well, I never have. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was like weird.
He never thought it was important to tell you that, I guess.
I mean, like he like at one point it was like, oh, you saved me, you brought me back, like in the beginning or whatever. Yeah, wow. Like, right, just like classic narcissistic stuff. So it's like, right, like who knows what actually was, like in his brain and heart and whatnot. But yeah, it was sad. Like there was a grieving process for sure. And I think that at that point, I'd sort of like, stopped going to church already, and like had developed a community outside of that. Like I said, like rock climbing is one of the things that I do, and hiking outdoors. And so like I had developed this community around, like outdoor activities and whatnot. And so it wasn't necessarily like the loss of community so much as it was, well, what's my family going to think? And yeah, like how does this work? Like long term, just like knowing, like what they believe, and like also like the judgments that they make of people who are outside of their faith system. And so that was the biggest grieving piece for me, and that was the scariest thing for me. And so it took me a long time to admit that to them.
How long was it between you when you spoke with your ex-husband at that point that you weren't a Christian, and when you spoke to your parents?
Well, I told my ex-husband when I was 32, and I talked to my dad for the first time about it 2 years ago, and I am 38 now. Okay, so about like 4.5. Yeah.
Did it feel like you just you knew if you opened that door, you'd, number one, open Pandora's box, but number two, you'd break his heart, kind of thing?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it was a lot of fear. Like, and yeah, I didn't want to break his heart, but like I also just like wasn't sure, like how do you maintain a relationship when that's out, particularly when I saw like, how they interact with people who are not in their same faith system.
How did they respond?
Well, not well, not well. My dad and I sort of went back and forth about it for a while. There was a lot of, like Lord, lunatic, liar kind of language. We went through kind of like everything, like all of my, like kind of like frustrations, grievances about how I was raised, big T and little T traumas. And then like a year and a half, 2 years later, I posted a video on social media talking about it. And this was after my dad and I went to counseling. We sat down and did some counseling together, and we sort of came to a place of like mutual understanding, but not necessarily like the closest in our relationship was like never going to be the same, I think, after I shared where I stood in terms of my faith. And I went public with my story after sharing everything with him and not going into nearly as much detail. And then I got a text from my sister a couple days later telling me that I was like an angry woman who just went on the internet to hurt my dad, and that I lied and I needed to take it down. And the way that I represented our family was a lie. So like a lot of gaslighting, because like then it also was like, well, what did I lie about? And those crickets. My mom and I also went through, are still sort of in the midst of, trying to figure out where we stand. But like the story, the narrative in my family is that I'm a liar, and that my recollection of my childhood is not real. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the biggest gaslighting.
Yeah. Huge. Yeah.
It really frustrates me when you really step back, like from our individual stories and just all these collective stories that are similar enough that you can be like, yeah, we can relate. You really start to do like postmortems on this stuff, like what's really happening in all this stuff. And what's crazy to me is, number one, I would say that people are addicted to mythology. They're literally like, they're not living their own lives. They're living through this Jesus story, the Yahweh stories, to think that, but at the end of the day too, like Jesus, the Jesus character is presented as saying, you must love me more than anyone else. If you want to be my disciple, you must be willing to leave mothers, fathers, children, families, lands, everything. And you must pick up your cross, follow me, count the cost. And it's this idea that you must be willing to, and in many ways, actually give up everything and count every other relationship so far lesser than me. Yeah. And you realize that what they're basically doing, our loved ones are saying, we literally, truly, fully, wholeheartedly love an ancient literary character more than we love you, our own precious child.
Yep.
And it's like, that is some, pardon me for saying it, but that's some fucked up shit. I mean, it's like you love a literary character more than your own flesh and blood. And it blows my mind. And I remember some of the first interviews I did were with JWs, where like they literally, like, your parents can talk to you. My dad's passed on, my mom can talk to me still, but like these JWs, like if you leave, like your spouse eventually leaves, your kids don't talk to you, your siblings, your parents, like everybody doesn't even, if you pass each other in the grocery store, they have to turn away and acknowledge, pretend you don't exist. And it's like, you literally want this literary character more than your own flesh and blood. And it just, people ask me like, why do we have these conversations, and why is this important? Why can't you just say I don't believe and then just walk away, go quietly into the night and be a atheist? Like, because it's fucking ruining families, it's ruining people, it's ruining children, it's like it's doing psychological abuse to children, but it's messing with adults too. Sorry, it looks like I'm disappearing there. Can you still see me?
Yeah. You broke up for just a sec, but yeah.
But it really breaks my heart. And it's you realize that this is a journey where you could literally imagine that they will go to the end of their days, number one, thinking it's all true. Number two, being willing to make you, like, rank you far, not even secondary, but like rank you like almost unimportant, as long as they can think to themselves, the minute that I die, I get to hear the words, you're well done, good and faithful servant. And you even can be proud. Can I ask this? Did you ever get to the point where you got to ask the simple question, Mom and Dad, do you think I'm going to go to hell? And are you okay with going to heaven while I'm in hell?
I didn't. I know that that's what they think. I mean, they sort of like told me as much. Like,
maybe rephrase the question. You know how the Bible says there's no pain, there's only happiness in heaven? Then if it's nothing but joy and bliss, then they technically can't be upset even if they know you're burning. So they're going to have to be fully satisfied in Christ while you're being tortured. What do you think they'd say to that?
I mean, I think that they would say that it's my choice. Yeah.
Well,
that would be what I would imagine. I mean, it's such an interesting way, because like putting it that way, I'm like, oh, like that feels so harsh, and it is, and it's true. Like that is like what they believe, right? And I think that there is like, I do think that they like care for me in like the best way that they know how. Like, I do think that there is a sense of love. And also, I just come back to like intent versus impact, and like the impact of telling somebody that they're evil and deserving of hell, right, is psychological damage, especially to children. That is neglect and it is emotional abuse. And I think that it is important that we call those things what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I've heard the expression so many times. I've used it, I'm sure, myself many times, that, we acknowledge that they're doing the best that they can. And maybe like 10 interviews back, somebody said something that really helped me put that in perspective. They said, there's probably some people that are alcoholics that would say the best they can do is drive their kids to school drunk, or they can, like, that's the best they can do is drive drunk with their kids in the backseat. And it's like, at some point you got to admit you're actually doing harm.
Yep. And that's exactly right, Tim, though. That's exactly it. It's like, yes, and right. Like, and that's, I think, what I mean when I say like intent versus impact. Like, you can have all of the best intent in the world. And when you're getting a thunderstorm, I don't know if you heard that here, but
God's not happy.
Yeah. When you hit a child, right? When you spank a child, when you hit them and then say, I have to do this because I love you, that means that the child is going to equate violence with love. And the intent is like to follow the word of God and to do something like that is good, and to like be listening to like, like what you believe, right? And also it is abusive. And so I think that example that you gave of like, like driving somebody to school, like drunk and somebody saying that's the best I could do. Yeah. Like that's still abusive. Right. And so I think that it is important, at least for me, like to not become bitter, is to like hold both compassion and anger and accountability, right? Like to hold both of those people, to hold both of those emotions and feelings, and to make space, to stay grounded, like in the values that I have around like kindness and compassion, and also say like, I'm not going to get small. I'm not going to take down my videos, and I'm not going to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate that so much, because I know that it does. I know what the cost of having a platform. I know the endless trolls and the endless emails you get. I remember the day I decided to do a YouTube channel, I was like, if you do this, you better have a thick skin. Like, make the decision right now before you even start. I was like, yep. I promised myself. I acknowledge. I know people are going to talk bad about me, and I'm okay with that. But it's hard. It's really hard to do it. And with this kind of journey, though. And by the way, I just want to acknowledge, I know there's a lot of comments. We will get to your comments in just a few minutes. But just in terms of, wrapping up a few other important topics, once you get to that point, there is like so much healing that has to happen, so much getting to know yourself again. We all talk about, I want to love myself. It's like, I don't even know myself. How can I love myself? You're like going back, you're doing the shadow work. You're like, where did I start? I was kind of like, I stopped my humanity at age 5. But so much reclaiming your identity and healing. What was the starting point for you? Like, how did you even start that process, both by yourself and with help or community?
Yeah. There's like quite a few people who talk about like the stages of deconstruction, but I'm thinking of Marlene Winnell in particular. And right, there's like this like beginning to separate, like there's like the sort of like this space of like seeing the cracks and like the web, which like took many years for me. And then this like ownership, right? Like this like ownership of, okay, like I can no longer, like there is like something, like you have the web, like, and then all of a sudden something comes and there's like one thing that sort of like shatters the glass. And for me, that was yoga. And I think something about yoga that was really important was like this like body connection, like this like, oh my God, like when I listen to myself, I'm not an asshole. You know what I mean? Like I'm actually like a good person. Like I care about people. Like I care about like making the world a better place than I came into it. Like, And so there was that piece. And then like there was certainly, and there has been like a healthy bit of like anger and like rage grounded in, right? Like I said, like this compassion and connection. And then I had my daughter 2.5 years ago, and having a child. I think for me, it caused me to connect so much more deeply, not just to, like these like generational, like breaking generational patterns, like not seeing like what happened to my parents too, like seeing their trauma and how that was passed down and blown through them by their parents. And then they passed it down and blew it through me and my siblings. And a decision of like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to face my demons. And so there's, like this space of anger, compassion, radical self-honesty, and a desire to create a better life for my daughter than I had, a better childhood for my daughter than I had. But in doing that, also seeing that the child inside of me deserves that too. And so doing it for both of them, right? Like both her and for me. And so, I've come, I think, sort of like full circle into a space of rebuilding. And in the rebuilding and in like being radically self-honest, there's been some fallout, right? Like as change, like as it goes, when there is change, like some people won't be there for it. Yeah. So I don't know if that fully answered your question, but
yeah, that's a great starting point. What was it like when you realized, both with your parents and probably a lot of other people, that this is just a much lonelier road? Obviously, we're building new communities, we're trying to build new connections, but in many ways, all the old foundations, the old safety nets are in many ways gone.
yeah.
And for at least a while, it's like, this is a very lonely road. I know for me as an introvert, that was not as big a deal. I was used to a very lonely road as an introvert. I liked my alone time. I liked being left to my own thoughts. But I've met enough people that I know that can be a living hell, where it's like, I am really alone. Like the people that I thought were going to maybe they were going to support me because I was going to be a missionary. They were going to literally send me to the mission field, or at least I wanted their applause, their respect, my parents, my siblings. And even if you're not like shunned, you kind of just feel like you're invited a little bit less. You don't get the texts as much. You're not, maybe you just kind of sense there's probably some other group family texts that you're not part of. And it's like, I'm being kind of pushed to the outside because I'm the black sheep now. And like, how did you deal with the lonely part of this?
Do you know, I spent so much of my childhood feeling like a deep sense of loneliness, and I always attributed that to my sin nature and like the like natural state of like men. That was just like what my parents told me, right? Like depression is really just like the natural state of the world. We just like all experience. And to be honest with you, like leaving actually brought me deeper in community, because a lot of the people that I was spending my time with doing like these things like in nature, outdoors, whatnot, were not Christians. So I was like able to like be close, and like in yoga, right? Like, so I was actually like, it actually, interestingly, because I know it's not that, I think, and I also think like, like the way in which you deconstruct and like the stages at which you like leave certainly matter, right? But I think I had already built up a community before fully leaving. A lot of people don't, and that is valid, and there's no like one true way to go. But I do think like community and connection are a human need. And so like finding it in things that like bring you joy and like actually connect to like who you are on like a soul level. And for me, that means like, like my value is like adventure, connection, having authentic, deep conversation, like finding people like in those spaces, like really helped me to feel not even like less alone, but like more connected than I ever felt in Christianity, because there was like always this like sort of like black cloud sort of like looming, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
It does. It's interesting. It's so good too. Like you said, that you had the community sort of in place there. I'm curious, besides yoga, what things have you done that have really helped you to be kind to yourself? Like it seems like with the theology, the worm theology and all that, we're so used to just putting ourselves down so much that one of the things of deconstruction, of course, starts with the truth claims of Christianity. Is this actually true? Is Jesus real? Is Yahweh real? Is the Bible from God? Whatever, is it divine? But when you deconstruct that and eventually deconvert and get away from it, you realize that a lot of the deconstruction process at that point that you've been doing up to that point is not like, that's not the end of it. The end of it is not saying Christianity is mythology and it's toxic, it's irrelevant. That is necessary as a starting point. But you're really at that point opening the door to deconstruct yourself. And I think one of the first things you realize when you deconstruct yourself is like, I have not been nice to myself. Like there are two voices in my head. One says, I'm a little child screaming for love and worth and self-acceptance. And I want to be okay. But there's another party that's like, you're bad. You're really bad. And you do deserve bad things. And if anything good happens, trust me, God's going to take it away eventually. He's going to give and take away. And you're going to be like, Job, he's going to eventually chastise you or test you. And you're going to deserve it all. You deserve the bad things that are coming. And you realize like, oh my God, like I'm my own worst enemy. Like I in some ways, I hate myself. What are some of the things you do to, besides yoga, to truly, be kind and just to like be gentle, maybe?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Such a good question, Tim. And like, thank you for bringing that up too, because I think that self-hatred is like not just something that happens as a result of Christianity or like high control religion. I think it is high control religion. Like if I hate myself, then I have to seek something else and I am able to be controlled. Right. But if I see myself as like a whole and autonomous person with dignity and choice, who does not need anything outside of themselves, then I can see myself as worthy, just as I see other people as worthy. And so for me, many, many, many years of therapy were super helpful. But the most supportive thing that I've ever done has been somatic work. And so, I'm a somatic practitioner, which means that I help people to reconnect with their body. And I have very regular somatic practices where I come home to my body. And it also helps me to detangle, because like what you described to me, if I may, have you heard of the term introject?
I don't think so.
Okay. So introject is, I believe it comes from Jungian psychology. But it is basically a voice from somebody else that gets stuck in your head. And so when you think and you hear like, oh, you're so bad, right? Like, and you hear this voice, like, I'm so bad. Like, I'm so, what's wrong with you? That was like a big one for me. And it still kind of can pop in there, but what's wrong with you? When I think back to my earliest memories of that, it's actually not me saying it. It's somebody else, right? And so being able to like recognize that, like that was installed in me. That doesn't comfort me. It's installed in me. Gives like that separation, like that sort of like bird's eye view to be able to be like, okay, like then like what is me, right? Like where am I in this? And perhaps you're the like the little kid, right? Like perhaps you're looking for, like, I just want to be loved. I just want to be accepted. I just want to belong. And so finding that voice, the voice underneath, and connecting to that. And there's all sorts of things, right? Like there's all sorts of things, like practices that I do. Like one of my favorites is like a centering practice where I come home to myself by centering in my length, the length of my being, and like the dignity, the inherent dignity and worth of who I am as a human being on this earth. And like width and connection, depth and presence, before then moving into, okay, I want to work on being kinder to myself. Where does that come from?
Great stuff. One thing I've been thinking about a lot in the last few years is the idea of sort of having conversations with my childhood self. in a,
Mm-hmm.
you know, fictional sense, obviously, but
Yeah.
still a meaningful sense. And
Yes.
also I've been realizing that at the same time, I like to imagine having conversations with my future self as well. Hopefully I live long enough to have a future self, et cetera. But,
Mm.
you know, to think it's not just about healing from your childhood, it's realizing that you wish you could go back and heal yourself as a child so that you were wholer now, but also to say, I'm going to sort of make a promise to my future self, as if my future self could come back in time and speak to me right now and say,
Yes.
hey, Tim, you might not be an old man yet, but you know what? Now's the time. You need to make these decisions now, because this will make your older, you know, life a lot different, just like you'd want to go back to your childhood. And it's
Yeah.
amazing, even though it's theoretical, it's fictional in one sense, having those conversations with yourself really does, it's like, you know, it sort of, it opens the door a little bit to the shadow work. I know there's a lot to that. And
Yeah.
I'm not a therapist, so I know that there's endless aspects of that I do not get, but I know enough to know that we have some very wounded, you know, childhood psyches, you know,
Yeah.
egos, and so to speak, that need healing. And
Yeah.
it's I love how you pointed out the idea of like having a child made a difference. That was literally my gateway drug to leave Christianity. We were
Mm.
you know the song Joshua Fought the Battle of Jericho?
Mm-hmm.
we I I've known that song my whole life. I've of course known the whole story. Excuse me. Excuse me. So I got a frog in my throat. I've even got a brother that's named after it, Joshua.
Yeah.
But we were doing like family time, as you do with kids, to raise them up to love the Lord and nurture and admonition. And we're singing, you know, the B.I.B.L.E., all these songs, and we get to Joshua Fought the Battle of Jericho. And for the first time in my life, even though I'd sung it, you know, hundreds of times perhaps, I began thinking to myself, I will eventually need to tell these kids the context of the story of the conquest of Canaan, and I
Mm-hmm.
will need to defend the genocide and the land theft and the child brides and the stoning.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and it was just like a cringe moment, like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to defend
Yeah.
genocide to my kids. And it wasn't enough to get me out. Sadly, it should have been enough, obviously, but it
Yeah.
wasn't enough. But it was a starting point of 3 years of deconstruction that eventually did lead to comparative mythology, which led to deconstruction, deconversion. But it's just, I say to people sometimes, I feel like my kids saved my life, you know?
Yeah. Oh, it's so beautiful. They are. They're, I mean, such little teachers, you know, like little portals. Yeah, to healing
Yeah. And you
and they
realize like
need us.
you can't do to them what was done to you.
Yeah, right. And that's it, right? It's like you have a choice. I have a choice. We have a choice to continue to pass on and blow through this trauma that we've been passed down, or to say, no, it ends with me.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
I wasn't charismatic, but I remember a lot of charismatics talking about generational curses and
Oh,
sometimes like demonic stuff. And it's interesting when you
yeah.
phrase it as a non-Christian, you're like, maybe the generational curse was Christianity. And yes, I will break
Right?
that curse. That's
Oh
crazy.
my God. Yeah. Yeah.
I meant to ask, I'm sorry, again.
No, I just completely like, I think about that kind of, and you know, like it's interesting being kind of on the other side. I'm like thinking and seeing like seeing the Bible for what it is, which is like this like messy, like historical text that has like teachings, like it is a teacher, and also like it's not perfect, right? But yeah, like there are things in there where you're like, oh, like 3 generations, like wow, like neuroscience is confirming that, like, you know, like in epigenetics, like that like trauma is passed down through 3 generations, like that you, yeah, I could go on, but yeah.
I meant to ask this earlier with the narcissist situation with your ex-husband.
Yeah.
Did part of your deconstruction at all have anything to do or relate to the idea of realizing that the Yahweh character is extremely narcissistic and psychopathic? Like, did those connections work of like, oh my God, I'm worshiping the same characteristics of a narcissist in real life. Yahweh is exhibiting them.
Yeah, I mean, 100, right? Like completely, as is like, right, like every evangelical pastor. Like, yeah. No, I mean, there's certainly like not until later, I think like was like that, like a clear connection. But yes, and like, right, like genocide, you're talking about, you know, like ordering child sacrifice, like how is that a loving God?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it amazes me that we really did get addicted to calling him this good father. And then
Mm,
you look at a lot of the stuff. I mean, there's some big stuff we go to quick, like Noah's flood, like what a good God drowned his own children. But then there's some slightly smaller stories, like where they beg for food and God sends snakes to bite them. And
yeah.
it's like what a good God did. But there's passages where God says, because you have disobeyed me, I will literally take you in front of your enemies and pull up your skirts and expose your nakedness to them. In another passage, he says, I'm going to smear poop on your face. I'm like, what kind of
Yeah.
God are we talking
Yeah.
about? I mean,
Yeah.
this is insane that this is our good father. And yet I think that's what really messed up our brains in many ways towards human relationships, is when you, from the earliest days, equate love with psychopathic abuse. It's like your chance at a healthy marriage or whatever is just, it's shot, because abuse and love go hand in hand.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Yeah, it's very confusing to like the nervous system to be like, yeah, right, like you are actively being harmed and this is love. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you
And you
ever,
can't heal. You can't
you
heal
can,
while that's being done. Yeah, you have to get space. Yeah.
yeah, you have to find a way to walk away. Do you ever find yourself healing and getting on yourself, hopefully still in a kind way, but like getting yourself like, what am I doing? That's the old Christian way of thinking. Like I need to pull those
Mm.
roots up. Is there anything like that ever happened to you?
I mean, I think that there are like body shapes that like I can take on that resemble like, like, oh, if I have an idea, like this is the right idea. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I take on this shape of like, I know, and I will tell you. And that feels like reminiscent of, like
Yeah.
proselytizing and trying to save people. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's almost
Yeah.
like we're addicted still to the fundamentalist black and white thinking in some ways.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Because, like I mean, we want certainty. We want control. That's like a human desire, right? Is like to control our environments and to make things just so that we feel safe, right? And yeah, like just like recognizing more and more, like as that's happening, like, oh, right.
Hmm.
There's the evangelist coming out.
I've been thinking about it and sort of talking about this a little bit in my channel, that I'm eventually going to do more like some presentations on it. But I think there's a part of us that needs to admit that we are healing from Christianity in Christian ways. And what I mean is, like, I've said to myself and others many times, like, I feel so bad for the people that go to their deathbed thinking that Jesus and Yahweh are real, and they literally in that context will never live a day of their lives for real. And I said, I think we end up, as people who've escaped that, we end up thinking, oh, that's not me. I'm living my real life. But in many ways, the roots of this went so deep that I think we're still actually quite stuck in it. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, you could be an atheist that can completely shred the claims of Christianity in the Bible, and you may actually still not be living a day of your life for real. And it's just, it breaks my heart a little bit, but it's more of a challenge to be like, well, how do we peel back the layers of this onion? But
Yeah. That reminds me, okay, so I brought up Marlene Winnell's name earlier. She coined the term religious trauma syndrome. And she talks about she's a psychologist. She talks about religious trauma as complex post-traumatic stress disorder, CPTSD. And I think like a lot of people like who come out of fundamentalism like have CPTSD, like myself included. And also like there is like, it is not an incurable thing. It is not like, like a sentence for life. But there's a lot of confusion, like when you're exposed to, so CPTSD is long-term relational trauma, right? And so that's religion. Like if you're in high control religion, you are exposed to long-term relational trauma, right? Because you are developed a relationship with this, like you said, psychopathic Yahweh, and like this blood sacrifice Jesus, and like you're the pastor's family, patriarchy, etc., right? Like that goes hand in hand with that. And so there's like this, like from many angles, this CPTSD. right? And so healing from that, like CPS, like it cuts you off, right? And so like this is like my whole, right, coming back to body-based work for me, because part of Christianity is that everything lives in your head. Like it's all intellectualized, right? Like there's so much that you have to like cut off from yourself in order to be in the religion, and in order to like, you know, like in order to live with the splitting that happens. And so in order to come back, or to like even know like what is your intuition, like for me, that was a long time. Like I didn't know. I didn't like I'd just be like, oh, I can't answer a simple question without like outsourcing first and like seeing what does everybody else think. So fawning, right? Fawning is the primary mechanism that or the primary like nervous system response to CPTSD, right? So like I can't make decisions for myself because I don't trust myself. I don't even know like where is myself. And so learning to reconnect like with my body and like find, oh, there's that like teeny tiny voice in there. Like there's that pull, like there's this like, okay, maybe like a sense of warmth when I think about, I don't know, having a hamburger for dinner versus like, oh, I think about, you know, whatever, something else like meatloaf. Oh, I feel a little cold. Okay. Like I can start to use those signals, like wherever they may exist in my body, and like start to make decisions from like here instead of here. And I think that like for me feels like the path back to my humanity.
I love it. Speaking of the phrase path back to humanity, we landed on the title, or I landed on the title, Deprogramming from Shame and Coming Home to Yourself. I know that coming home to ourselves is a journey. We're never going to be like, yes, I'm done. We're not going to be finished. But in a sense, in an overarching sense, you know, looking for homeostasis, just looking for feeling safe in your own skin. Do you feel like in many ways you've come to a good place for where you're at in life and for your healing?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I am more fulfilled in the work that I'm doing than I ever have been in my life. I feel more connected to my community, to my family, like my nuclear family, to this earth than I ever have before. And I feel like I have like this relationship with myself where it feels like I'm nurturing like this body that I have, as opposed to just like trying to shut her down all the time. Yeah. So yeah, I can confidently say yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Beautiful stuff. Well, I wanted to ask, well, let me ask this real quick before I forget. Are you taking clients? Can people reach out to you?
Yes, I am. And absolutely.
Is that
My
for all?
websites. Mm-hmm.
Like I know some people have certain states they work with. Can you work with people from any state?
Yeah. So, as a somatic coach, there's no restriction around states. Yeah.
Okay, great. And for anyone, again, that didn't join us earlier, all the links to connect with Beth are beneath this video. I was going to ask you, I'm going to go to the comments if I could now just for a few minutes. But before I do, just ask you to think about that question we talked about before we started recording. You know, what would you say to someone that's going through the hardest part, where they maybe they can't go backwards, but they also feel like they're frozen. If they go forward, all kinds of stuff falls apart, whether it's their marriage, their relationship with their parents, maybe it's just their mental health. Even they're like, you know what, I have to believe in a God. I mean, I have to believe in a God and a heaven and a eternal purpose, that there's someone that's watching over me, there's guardian angels, etc. Like I don't want a life that's anywhere near nihilism. Feels like that's too scary.
Yeah.
I'm not going there. And whatever it is, there's all kinds of scariness. They're just right on that, you know, razor edge, that tightrope walk. What, you know, in a few minutes when we're done with the comments, if you could just think about what you would say to someone that's just scared as hell. No pun intended. But if I'm going to read these comments, if there's any that you want to you respond to, please feel free to jump in. Trudy says, so glad to be watching. Thank you so much, Trudy, for being here. Susanna in Scotland, thank you so much for being here. Hello, everyone. I lived in Aspen, Baseball for 10 years. What a great time in my life. That's awesome. Steve Jacatis, thank you so much, Steve, for being here. Do you know Steve, by the way? He's from Recovering from Religion. He's up in Canada, but he's a great guy. He focuses on humanism a lot. He's been awesome. On the channel a few times. Steve's awesome.
Cool.
Laura says, hey, everyone. Great to see you guys. Again, Susanna. Laura says, patriarchal for sure. I hear you, Beth, loud and clear. Innocent babies labeled as evil. I love what you're sharing about interconnection. I'm going to skip through some of the highs. Hello, blanket hello to everybody. I remember the umbrellas of authority to this day, sadly. Yeah.
Oh God, that one's still like, I'm like, yeah.
Did part of your deconstruction at all in many ways involve just being willing to, and even in a generic sense, realize that embracing feminism is a pretty important piece of healing?
Yes, absolutely. I think I started with the feminism before I left, like officially. Yeah, I think equality and like social justice have always just been like a part of like my being. Like they're just things that I like really care about. And so yeah, I think feminism is really just like humanism, right? Like we're all people. Yeah.
It was funny. I had this friend of mine from kindergarten. We grew up memorizing endless verses. Her dad was a teacher at the same Christian school as mine. We were like the pinnacle Christian kids, and her name was Susan. And someone, as you do, you grow up, you go different ways. Someone through the grapevine reached out and was like, "Did you hear what happened to Susan?" I was like, "No, what? Like, she's not a Christian anymore." I'm like, "There's no way." Mm-hmm. Susan. So I reached out to her by email. And she starts, in my words at that time, she starts going on and about feminism and patriarchy. And I'm like, oh my God, like she probably went to some liberal ass school and she got into a feminist atheist professor. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I cannot believe this. And literally like 10 years later, I kind of came back crawling. She was like, Susan, like knock, knock, knock. I need to tell you something. You were right. And 10 years ago, I could not hear it.
I love that. Yeah.
Oh it was nuts. She's actually, I was privileged to actually to interview her. Her interview, I'll send it to you all later. I'll put it in the link to the video as well later. But that was one of the most intense interviews I've ever done in my life. We cried through that one. It's weird to go back to like someone you grew up with in kindergarten and you both got indoctrinated together at the same time, mm-hmm. and began a life of like intense missions and everything. And you both leave. It was very, very real tears in that one. Laura says human beings control when things are terrifying. Yep. Human beings control when bad things have happened to them and they're trying to prevent them from happening to others. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how much life is about either controlling people or being controlled. A lot of life fits into that. Born into a space of disconnect from our bodies. It's tragic when we look back and see what's happened to our nervous systems and our self-image. Yeah. So true, Beth, disconnected from self and everything must be outsourced. Women's sexuality is viewed as a light switch. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Purity culture objectifies. Yeah, for sure. Was told that every time I was intimate before marriage was a part of my soul would be stolen. Wow. Had you ever heard something like that?
I mean, like the chewed gum analogy, right? And like the spit in a cup, like those for sure, but not, like that a piece of my soul will be stolen. But like, I guess like maybe it was like more like you were giving away parts of yourself that you could never take back that belong to your future husband. So I guess, okay. Yeah.
I've heard, I know some
coming back.
Some Christians I've heard get real into the soul ties thing. Have you heard the soul ties phrase? Mm-mm. Like you're even if you're not having sex with somebody, you could have a soul tie with someone that's not in love with Jesus, and now you need to kind of pray the soul tie away, like it's some kind of spiritual bondage or something. But anyway, it's very sad. They'll come up with kinky. They'll come up with any way they can to control your body. Yeah. I love this, Mark. Beth doesn't look depressed, does she? No, you do not look depressed. You look full of joy. I used to ask people all the time. I don't ask as much, but could you take a second and contrast the joy you had in Christianity versus the joy you have now?
Oh my God. Yeah. It was like so fake. Like, so not like, I didn't even look back at pictures of myself as a child and be like, wow, she looks so sad, even smiling. Like, that's a sad girl, And I'm like, now just like, yeah. And people have said it too. Like, wow, like you just look so like good. Like what's, what's going on? Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I had so much more peace. And I think part of it is not just the actual peace, but it's just the realization that you've been on a hamster wheel and you've been set up to fail and you've been lied to. And it's like, suddenly it's not like there's necessarily true peace in the old spiritual Christian sense. It's just like, I finally took, it's like being underwater for far too long, and you finally take your first deep breath. It's like, I'm just so happy to finally be in my own skin again. And like, to say you have to juggle all these discrepancies of like, yeah, I know that evolution, it looks like there's evolution, but it's 6,000 years old. It looks like the stars are billions of light years away, but they're not really that far away. Or, God made the light in between. It's like, you're just fumbling everything, trying to make God, the Bible, okay. And you're like, suddenly you're like, okay, so I can just stop this whole charade. It feels so nice to like start your real life.
It's like putting on glasses for the first time, like when you need, like vision corrected, and you're like, oh my God, I can actually see clouds.
Yes, exactly. I love those videos. I haven't seen one in a while, but where like a little child has like the thing for their ear, for their hearing, and like they've never truly heard their mom's voice. And then you've seen that, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like the cochlears.
Yeah, and then they finally hear their parents' voice at first. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Purity culture objectifies and treats a woman as a sexual being and all men as monsters. It fails to teach caring relationships because we're so uptight we can't be intimate. Yeah, it is sad. Let's see here. Laura says, "Greatest Love of All" by Whitney Houston would be playing on the school bus, and I would think to myself, that's not love. That's not true. Loving God is the greatest love of all. Now I'm learning to love myself. That's awesome. Susanna says, "No shopping, no skirts above the knee, no cinema." I'm guessing that's either Sundays, or was that, maybe that was all the time? Probably with the no shopping, that was Sundays. But yeah, Sundays, definitely that whole Sabbath thing. I remember did you ever watch Chariots of Fire, that old movie?
No.
It's a beautiful movie. It's about these runners that at least one of them was very convicted because he was going to run on the Olympics, but they had scheduled the running team to run on Sunday. He's like, no, I will honor God and I will not run on the Sabbath. And it's just beautiful. I mean, it's like, it's the soundtrack of your dreams. It's incredible, beautiful old movie. But it's always like, it's the Sabbath. Be careful. Let's see here. I'm not able to rest without extreme guilt. Oh, my heart goes out to you, Susanna. Me, ditto here. Same thing. Susanna, that's how I ended up in chronic burnout. Still feel guilty even when I'm unwell. Yeah, it's hard. Sometimes even when we're sick, I agree with that. I've had that where when you're sick, you're like, I should not give myself more than like 24 or 36 hours. I should be out of bed, even if you're like, you shouldn't be. Like, no, that's enough. Get up, force yourself. Wish I'd been more rebellious. Yeah, I kind of do, Mark. I know what you mean. I kind of do, and I kind of don't. I feel like if I'd been more rebellious, I would have gotten a bunch of people pregnant. I don't want to. I don't know that I would have wanted to do that, but yeah, I hear you. I think a little bit of just tasting wine maybe would have been a good thing for me. Laura says, "Tim working at the art gallery sounds amazing." It really was. It was crazy cool. I wish I could go back and just relive those days. Apart from being at Bob Jones, I'm there, Mark, but I can't stop being on my own with my 6 children. Yeah. Susanna, our heart goes out to you. I know Susanna's a single mom with 6 kids over in Scotland, and it's a lot. It's a lot to try to focus on self-care when you've got little ones. You have just the one so far, right?
Just one, yeah. I'm a one and only.
That's awesome. Is it kind of nice to be able to focus all your attention on just having one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know like what it would be like otherwise, but I love it. It's wonderful. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a mom, and it's been so fantastic.
That's awesome. I've got four kids between age 6 and 11, so it's nonstop. But it's such a joy. Kids are so wonderful. Laura says it was also taught that yoga was demonic. Yeah. Laura says, Beth, I was also married at 28 to an abusive narcissist. We separated, and a Christian counselor advised me to get a divorce for my safety. Oh
my God, same. That's crazy. Yeah. I was with a Christian therapist who was like, he's a clinical narcissist.
I gotta give kudos though, your advisors, your counselors were willing to say move on, because in a lot of Christian circles, it's like, this is your cross to bear. You cannot get divorced. Yeah. That's some sick stuff too. But let's see here. Susanna says, oh my goodness, this is so relatable. Yeah. Let's see here. It's so hard when our siblings connive with the gaslighting and scapegoating. Yeah. Beth, I'm so sorry you were gaslit by your family. I'm going to skip a few of these. I know some of these are more like chit chats amongst yourselves. And by the way, I love that you all are our family. Thank you all so much to the family that I love you all so much. Kevin says, so sad what this does to families. Yeah. Yeah. The gaslighting by family is fucking disgusting. Yeah, it is. And it's so hard when we have grown up without real genuine human kindness and acceptance, because it's all been warped by religion. Yeah. You realize so much of what you deserved and needed as a kid is just never happened. And anything you do now is more like in part of healing, but it's like you can't go back in time. But the one thing I love to think about, Beth, you know how like they say that the light takes a long time to get from one place to another, and that you when you see stuff like in the night sky, the stars, you're not seeing them as they are now, you're seeing them as they were perhaps billions of years ago. And you think to yourself at the same time, in that sense, that if someone could be putting a telescope on our planet right now from way out there, that someone could theoretically be watching you as a 5-year-old right now, like right this minute. Isn't that crazy to think about?
That is wild to think about. Yeah.
Time is weird. It's crazy.
It is wild.
Let's see here. Religion warps what love and kindness truly are. Yeah. Yes, Beth, don't make yourself small. Please continue to share your story. Absolutely.
I will.
HVAC, thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate it. Appreciate all your kindness to me. Christianity is so filled with lies, it causes you to completely disassociate from yourself. I was deep in the John MacArthur sect, and they swore they weren't legalists. They would say you have freedom in Christ. Yeah. Freedom in Christ was BS. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again so much, HVAC. Really appreciate your kindness to me in the channel. Radical self-honesty. Yep. So glad we escaped Bible prison. He whom the Son has set free is free indeed. Lies. Fuck that. Yep. Absolutely. It's so encouraging and to hear Beth's story and to see the genuine freedom on her face as I begin my healing. Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. What Beth says is so emotionally intelligent. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And by the way, the reason Beth and I connected in the first place is because of her Instagram channel. She's got more than that out there, obviously. But if you all, like what you hear, and I think a lot of you are, please go check out her Instagram channel when we're done and follow her there. She's doing great work. Yeah, be kind to ourselves. And just a few more here, and we'll get back to the wrap up. I have literally visualized picking up and removing my childhood self from my childhood home and carrying her someplace safe. It's calming and helps me to remember I deserved none of what happened. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. I love that. You can take care of your childhood self now.
Yep. I love too what you said, by the way, about spanking. Thank you so much for bringing that up. That was, I of course, as a fundamentalist Christian, I did spank my kids when they were little, but fortunately, I escaped when they were all very young, very, very, very young. But one of the first thoughts that crossed my mind, like in the first week, maybe in the first few days, was I need to raise my kids with thought autonomy. They need to be able to think for themselves and make up their own decisions, what's best for them. And it was almost like an immediate, like ping pong, thing of like, well, you can't emphasize thought autonomy and not also emphasize body autonomy. So like, are their bodies safe? Are their thoughts safe? Will their body safe? Well, they go hand in hand. And I was like, and I was so glad. It was literally like one of the best decisions of my life was to immediately say no more corporal punishment. And it's literally changed my life in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
And also to apologize. I probably apologized to my kids 50 times in the first year after that happened. It's like, I'm really sorry. Like, I really should have never done that to you. But I think it's important. You don't want to over talk all these things that, kids just need to be kids. But at the same time, it was important for me to tell them, like, this was really wrong, and daddy acknowledges it was wrong. So
that's so important.
Yeah. Having children makes us definitely question how God could come close to making Abraham kill his only son.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us here. Appreciate that. Let's see here. Yep. Yeah, I was a psychopath. Anyone else trying to make up for lost time? Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I wish we could literally make up for lost time. But let's see here. Agree, Tim. Will we ever live a day how we would, had we not known what we would do? I think I'm reading that wrong, but I think I get what you're trying to say. Yep. Psychologist Tim Fletcher, also on YouTube, is great on this topic. Lots of actionable skills for coping with CPTSD. Reparenting advice, super helpful. Thank you. I'll look him up. I appreciate that very much. Mark, it can feel like a full-time job, but you are worth it. I promise you. 8 years on this journey, and I have a life I wouldn't trade for anything. Yeah. We are all worthy of love. Absolutely. Yep, soul ties narrative, another bit of BS to make us feel bad for relationships. And yep. So I think I covered the big comments there, but thank you all so much for again for being a part of this live stream and just being part of the channel. And again, please do support Beth. Please make sure you subscribe to her work. By the way, Beth, are you ever interested in doing a YouTube channel?
You know, I've thought about it. I have my hands full right now, but maybe.
Well, if you ever do, please come. We'll put it on blast. But please come back for that. We'll help you get some subscribers fast. If anyone has a final comment, it takes 30 seconds or so for me to see it. So if you have any final comments, feel free to put it in real quick. But otherwise, we're going to go to Beth for a final word. Beth, anything else that we didn't cover that was on your heart to cover? And then my other question of what you would say to someone that's going through the hardest part of this.
I feel like we covered quite a lot. Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Someone who's going through the hardest bit. I think just in hard times, generally, my advice would be to see if you can find space, like just any space. Lie on your floor, in your bed, whatever, like moments, micro moments even, to just connect with yourself and to see the goodness in you that you see in everyone else. Because you are worthy. You are good enough. You are loved. And there is so much more in the world to be seen and to experience when you remove the lens that somebody else put on you that you didn't have a choice over. So just be kind to yourself in it and know that there's support if you need it.
I love that. I love it. It's amazing. Going back for a second to what you're saying about there's some things you can say about Jesus or whatever that you could take. One of them that I'm sure you probably copied from somewhere else was that verse, "The truth will set you free." And I love the fact that it is true. The truth being that Christianity is mythology and it is irrelevant and toxic. But in general, the truth will set you free. And so many of us have been sold a bunch of lies, and in many ways we've been in prison, but we've also been our own prison guards. And it's just so beautiful to be like, it's time to end the lies.
Yeah.
I apologize. My voice is just raspy today. It's time to end the lies and to really come home to yourself. And I love what you're doing. In so many ways, people like you are helping us to get through identify the lies in the first place, and to then tell ourselves the truth and be kind to ourselves through it all. But well, thank you so much, Beth. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Not that I can think of. Thank you so very much, Tim, and everyone for joining. It's been an honor to be with you today.
Absolutely. It's our honor and privilege as well. Thank you so much. It's been great to get to know you. And again, everyone, all the links to get to know Beth are beneath this video. And as I like to say, thank you all for being part of our community and letting us be a part of your lives. Thanks again. Have a great day. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks, Tim.